Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Tattoos and
This
Jesus.
is not just another episode, Joshua.
Yeah, well, special episode. If we knew how to do like really cool sound effects, maybe we'll make an alarm or alert or
But we
some
can't.
some type.
We want to welcome back to the show. One of our, actually, I think one of our more touted guests from last year,
Wow.
Mr. Jeremy Jernigan.
Yeah, welcome
Touted.
back.
I'll receive that, guys. I like
Yeah,
We'll
that.
take it. Listen, nobody knows the truth, so you can actually say we can say whatever we want and be like, "This is the best
man,
podcast.
telling
Everybody
you
loves it." Nobody
I'm gonna
knows.
say that
this.
I have been highly touted
Yeah,
by
Highly.
podcasts.
yes,
Um,
yes. You are the number one guest in Spartanburg, South Carolina for the number one Christian podcast in Spartanburg, South Carolina. So like you are the top.
you're up there.
You're the
Do I
top.
need to update my social media
A
bios?
hundred,
Like
a
just
hundred percent.
that
I
sounds like
mean,
that's the
I
We're
think
go-to
it
right
could
there.
I think it could definitely help you out.
I
For
like it. All
sure.
right.
Oh, dude, how are you doing?
I'm good, guys. It's been fun. I'm stoked that you guys invited me back. That's always a
Yeah.
good sign. You never know, when you're meeting new
Yeah,
people and
right.
you're like, I felt good about it, but I don't know how they felt. So I felt that you invited me back. So
Yeah,
you must have felt good enough.
we're good.
Okay, so I
Yeah.
felt
I
good with
was
you guys,
what's
and
crazy.
it's good to be
So
back.
you had mentioned last time we talked that you had a book coming out,
Mhm.
and you wanted to reconnect the first of this year once it was closer to the book release, and then when we finally connected, and you're like, dude, you're ready for round two. I'd been following you on social media, and so I had seen that there was some pre-launch stuff happening, and like it was coming up, and so I was like, dude, I was going to reach out to you once the book launched, and so the
Let's
fact that you
go.
reached out. So when uh fast forward that you are releasing a book titled The Edge of the Inside, correct?
That's correct.
And when does it officially release?
March 31st.
Hey. So
Okay.
next week
Next week.
So I don't know when this is going to post,
This will
but
post
w-
probably the
we can
26th.
post it whenever you
Yeah, if
as
you
the
have a
as the
preferred time.
for the status of who you are in Spartanburg, South Carolina.
Yeah,
Whenever you want us to
because of
post
how
it.
touted I am.
Yes,
that's correct.
because you are at that level, then whenever you want us to post this podcast, we'll post it.
Excellent. So it's
Um,
so it's
yeah.
probably out then by the time most people are
Yes.
listening to this. Yeah. So I was telling you guys beforehand, it's crazy to work on. This took me 5, 6 years to work on. It's very personal, not just in my journey, my story, which we talked about the last time I was on, but then how it's shaped how I've understood God differently, how I've understood the church differently. So to have like years and years of something that you've been working on, and then suddenly everybody else gets exposed to it, and gets to like react to it is kind of a crazy, jolting
Yeah.
feeling.
Is it
But I've been
bittersweet a
so
little bit?
encouraged.
Because it's very vulnerable.
The bittersweet is when you get the haters,
Yeah.
and I don't know. And there's some people that are really good at that. I'm not really good at that. Like that just bothers me. But there's things that's like I've got to a piece where it's like this is how I understand God. If it's helpful for you, run with it. If it's
Yeah.
not, like I'm good. Like you're good. Like to take something else if it works better for you.
Do you find that it's easier to put yourself out there when you're like fully resolved to the beliefs that you're talking about?
100%.
Like I have
Yeah.
found it's easier for me to be more controversial, say call it that, when it's like I know that I've studied this inside and out and this is where I land.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm willing to take the criticism because it's nothing that I haven't already thought about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I bet you guys get this a lot, like relationally from like more of a counseling point of view. When you talk to someone and like, have you ever had the reaction where you tell someone, "Oh, like that's cool that you believe that. Like I don't see it that way," and then
Yeah.
just that acknowledgement, like roils them up. Like, "Oh,
Yeah.
what?" And what you realize is like, oh, if you have that reaction to someone disagreeing with you, is because you're not at peace with your own ideas.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like I'm totally at peace with someone saying, "Yeah, like chapter 9, like totally disagree with you." Like,
Yeah.
cool, like all right, like that makes sense. It's what makes the most sense to me. But like I don't I don't need you to validate that in me. Like that's already what makes the most sense to me. But I have found when I do think there will be people who will read this book, especially part two, with some. I've heard
Yeah.
from numerous people like, I've never heard these ideas before. That's one of the things I'm hearing.
Hmm.
I think people are going to be like, this makes me uncertain about what I believe.
Hmm.
And you can either choose curiosity in that moment, you lean in, you're like, I'm going to learn
Hmm.
more, or defense, where, hey, this makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't like this feeling, so I'm going to blast it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's the vulnerability, is someone like blasting it without maybe really understanding it or sitting
And
with it.
and do you like when it comes to the audience in mind? Because I always hear about this when people write. The audience in mind for those that are reading is, I mean, are Christians, but primarily evangelical Christians, right?
That's probably who will resonate with the most
Yeah.
content in the book.
And
And
probably give you the most hate.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Although I'm at a point now where I suspect most of the people that really would hate my work probably aren't following me and probably aren't going to read it. Whereas
Okay.
Yeah.
before I was in more of the traditional
Yeah.
evangelical settings, that I would have, like, someone would have stumbled into this and been like, "Oh, I thought it was this and it's not."
Yeah.
Now I think people, if you follow my work, you're kind of like, "Yeah, I have an idea of where this is going."
Yeah.
And but I mean, I've got like audio adrenaline references in there,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
evangelical peeps will be like, "Oh, this guy's one of us. Like, he knows. He
Yeah.
Hey,
knows this."
listen, Audio A was my jam.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm
Ah, they are
saying.
still.
Man.
I could sing them right now. Mm.
I have a joke in the
Audio.
book that it wasn't even a joke. It was a line I was writing. And every time I would read the line over again, I would think of this audio adrenaline song. And to the point where I'm like, I got to add a joke in there about it, because every time I see this sentence, it makes
Yeah.
me think of it. So I just added it in. And I was
Man.
on a podcast yesterday. Someone's like, "Oh, audio adrenaline was my jam. I loved it." And I was like, "You're a real one if you
Yeah.
get that reference." So there you go.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Throwback.
I actually saw Mark Stewart was DJing last year in Spartanburg. He was like the DJ for Tim Hawkins, the comedian.
Oh yeah.
And so Mark Stewart was kind of the one that was just transitioning the show. And like I really wanted to like take a picture with him.
You're
Lead
still
singer of
you're
Audio
still a fanboy.
Adrenaline, his vocal cords go out. And I didn't have the guts to do it. I was too fanboyed in that moment. 14-year-old Marty was just like, that guy, man.
Did you take a picture of him from afar and
I
like zoom
did.
in?
I did take a
Yeah,
picture
you
up from
did.
afar. And with AI, I could still have a picture with him.
That's
Yeah.
true. You take that
So,
photo you have and you just add yourself into it.
Yeah.
man. Well, I want to dive in. So you were on the podcast about 6 months ago. So if you're new to Tattoos and Jesus and you haven't heard the first interview we had with Jeremy, it was October 5th, I think, is when it released. And it's titled "What's Bad for the Ego is Good for the Soul."
Mm.
Which I probably owe you some royalties on because I use that phrase in counseling at least once a week.
Nice. Getting some
Um,
traction out of it.
so I love that phrase. And so anyway, you tell the story of kind of what got you to this place where you're at, which I think is kind of the catalyst for the book as well.
Yeah.
And so we're not going to go down that rabbit hole because you can go back and listen to the full unpacking of your journey. But just for
Fun
like,
fact for you, Marty.
yeah.
I shared a lot of this publicly on your podcast before I shared it anywhere else. Like, I remember on that
Oh.
episode sharing some details
Yeah.
that I had written in the book that I knew, like, I haven't shared this yet. So I think your crew got some behind the scenes early
Looky
stuff.
there,
Man.
man. That really
Man.
gives
You
the
know what?
the
We'll add you to the upstate of South Carolina. You're number one in the ups,
yeah.
not just
Listen,
Spartanburg,
Yes. Let's just
the
those
move this
whole
up.
upstate of South
Yes.
Carolina
our 12
is
listeners got a treat.
whoa,
Yeah, they
whoa, whoa,
did.
13.
So give us just to get everyone up to speed, like the edge of the inside. What does that mean? Like what is this book about? The Cliff Notes version of the journey that got you to the point of wanting to write this book. Like get us caught up to speed here.
So I was the guy that was on the inside of Christianity. Preacher's kid, so I'm second generation pastor, literally the kid growing up in the pews, right? And then that's my career for 2 decades. I get the degrees in it. I have a church ministry degree, a biblical studies master's degree, and then just rising through the ranks of mega churches, 10,000, multi-site churches, and eventually become a lead pastor. All of that is like the ideal trajectory I would have ever wanted for, growing up.
Yeah.
Like it was
You got
amazing.
what you wanted.
Yeah.
100% got it. Thought, like this is my dream job. I'm going to retire. So the whole point of the book was in 2020, everything unraveled. That's the story I shared in part one, story I shared with you guys the last time. And it was that journey out of that of I don't want to leave Christianity, but I can't exist in this way anymore. And I didn't know what to do with that. And that began what has been literally 5, 6 years of soul searching liminal space. And I was sharing my story one time at an event, and this was a few years back. And someone came up to me and they said, "Hey, do you know that Father Richard Rohr has a phrase that is exactly what you're describing?" And I'm like, "No, I don't. Please send this to me." So they send me this. It was like a 2, 3 page uh, excerpt of a PDF of like some other thing that he had made, and he uses this phrase on the edge of the inside. And he makes the argument in this that we expect truth to be found in the center of something. And you would think that's where you're going to go and you get the truest version of it. But what Rohr argues is that truth is often better found on the edges or on the margins than in the center. And when he laid this out, it was like these words like brought my soul to life. Like
Mm.
this is what I've been through. This is my journey. And how like I'm not bitter today. I'm so grateful for all of it, which is kind of the weird paradox of this. Like,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I hated it. It was brutal. It, totally beat me up. But on this side of it, I feel like I'm a way better version of me and my ideas. I like way more than the ideas that I had previously. And so
Yeah.
I actually really like what the edge has led to. Now, the nuance that I think is helpful for people is I think for a lot of people, if you have an issue with Christianity, or some theology or a church or whatever it is, which happens to a lot of people, right? You have something goes funky and you're like, I don't know. You often conclude, well, if I can't stick with this, if I can't make this work, then I got to just bail on the whole thing and I got to be out. And so I think
Mhm.
some people feel like I'm either inside or I'm outside.
Mhm.
And what I'm trying to do in this book is make space for people on the edge
Mhm.
to say, those aren't your only two options. You don't have to be a total insider or a complete outsider. You can live on the edge, and actually, there is life on the edge, and God is on the edge, and you might experience Jesus in profound ways that you never experienced before. And the coolest thing that has been happening since the book has been read by some early readers has been people telling me this is my story too, and this is resonating with me, and these are the conversations I'm having. And so that's really the hope, is not just my story, but my story is an indicator of what a lot of other people are going through, and trying to make space for all of us to experience the fullness of what the edge can mean.
Yeah, I mean that's no, that's great because even when we talk on the podcast or we've shared things when we went through different topics and things like that, and you get certain feedback. Like what we've come to realize is that is a perfect example of what's happened just in personally and in the conversations we've had with other people because the center is safe. Like there's a lot of space around the center to feel comfortable, to feel safe, to feel secure, but the edge feels dangerous.
Yeah.
And but the reality is, and I've said this a lot on the podcast, I'm kind of in the same place that this book talks about. I'm one of those people that's like, man, this is great. I'm such at peace on the edge,
Mm,
way more secure and safe on the edge than I was in the center.
mm,
And I think it's just some people feel like they have to be there and they have to be in the center and they have to be, and it even plays on like psychological things we've talked about, like wanting to feel safe and have a community and do all this and that. But there's always like a missing factor. And another piece of that is on the edge, sometimes it can feel a little isolated.
well, the interesting thing about the edge is you can become the target of people from the center and people from the outside,
Yeah.
Mm,
which
That
that's
is an
good.
reminds me of,
interesting dynamic.
I
That is
use the
good.
phrase both and a lot. where I'm like, it's both and. It's both and. It's not one or the other. Anytime you go to an extreme, you're getting something really right and something really wrong. I
Yep.
feel like truth is somewhere in the middle. It's this tension. I said the problem with being in the middle is you get shot by both sides.
Yep.
It's like a battlefield. To stand in the middle and try to call peace, you just get shot by everybody. And I think you probably find yourself sometimes in that situation where it's like you haven't abandoned your faith enough for the non-believers,
Right.
but you're
Right.
not embracing your faith enough for the believers. Or I'm not even going to say embracing your faith, embracing the predetermined religious constructs of your faith enough for Christians to be happy with you.
And all of it happens in the same social media thread.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know what I
You're
mean?
like 0 to 0 in 3
No, but like
posts.
literally I'll get both extremes leveled at me in the same thread to the same content, and
Yeah.
that's the wild thing, it's
Mm-hmm.
the hyper evangelicals who are like you're not holding to our dogmas enough, you're not really one of us. And then it's the atheist like, you really believe in this fairy tale? And it's like
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm getting it from both sides. And
Yeah.
I agree with you though. Like I think often it's a more nuanced view where you're like, hey, I can relate with both of these camps. Like I can understand why you're
Yeah.
critical of Christianity. I can also understand why people believe it. Like,
Yeah.
and so somehow making the space, and I literally find myself spending about mixed time on both of those, talking to outsiders, trying to tell them like, hey,
Yeah.
there are some good parts of this, and then talking to insiders, and I'm like, hey, there are some things you might need to be willing to change your mind on.
Yeah. So
Mm.
to try to summarize it, when you're talking about the edge of the inside is, I don't even know if this, I would say faith, but that's sometimes ambiguous. You would say Christian faith, I
In
think,
this context, yeah, yeah.
in this context, like it's Christian faith and the predominant evangelical church that has dominated Western Christianity for the last, I don't know, 150 years or whatever, is the inside. What you're saying is, I'm going to the fringe of that. I'm letting go of a lot of that, but I'm not trying to let go of Christ.
Right.
And I'm trying to live in this tension. And you put, I think there's a quote from the book where you're like, the sinner, which is so much about really its cultural center, is to that evangelical perspective. It represents certainty, structure, and institutional religion and comfort above all. Um, but the edge represents tension and uncertainty. But then you put that, I think, is what y'all are just talking about. It also provides honesty and transformation.
Yeah.
Where when you're stuck in the middle, it's transformation is you have to become like what we've said you have to become.
Mm.
Right.
It's more conformity than it is transformative, because there's not freedom to say, what is God doing in my life if it doesn't look like this?
Mm.
Well, and that's where the center works until it doesn't.
Mm.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're in the center and you believe the right things, you do the right things, you love it. It's great.
Yeah.
Mm.
But the moment it stops working, the moment you can't do those things, you can't
Mhm.
believe the right things, you can't keep upholding, you realize the center will reject you. And that's what a lot
So
of people have found. It's like,
is it
oh, I
safe?
lost my tribe.
Is it safe to
Mm.
say that for many people, probably the vast majority of people, the current state of the church is sufficient for them?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
And
a great
so
way to say it.
you're not, in many ways, those aren't the people that are going to be interested in your book.
Well, I have a
Because
joke. Uh, that's one of my favorite jokes. Um, let's read this real quick. I said, if your experience with Christianity has been everything you ever hoped for and more, you might be in the center of it. I won't get my feelings hurt if you prefer to stop reading at this point. You'd
Mhm.
probably get more out of reading a Joel Osteen book. Then I say, actually, I lied. I want you to keep reading. If you choose the Joel Osteen book over mine at this point, I have no other option other than to hope you crave Chick-fil-A every Sunday. Which I love that joke so much. I was walking down the street one night and I heard someone yell that to someone else. And I literally was like, that's a hysterical like curse to put on someone in
Yeah.
like the churchiest of ways. And
Oh
I
yeah.
literally that night wrote it into like the ending of chapter one. So
that's
like I love that.
that's funny. So here's my first question for you as we dive into this book further, right? And that is this: is you went through heartbreak that led to your resignation from the church that we fully unpack in the first episode in October. And that has led you through this deconstruction, reconstruction journey that lives at the edge.
Yeah.
So, what I find to be interesting is so, in many ways, this book is a memoir of your experience that led to theological transformations along the way. But Josh and I are seeing it within ourselves, but also just within the community of people that we're connected with much through this podcast, that your story is both uniquely yours, but it seems to be part of a cultural shift that's happening where it's like there's some like people coming out of the woodworks. And so I don't know if we just haven't been part of those circles, or do you feel like in some ways that your shift is just no, this was my personal experience, and if you can benefit from it, enjoy this book? Or do you feel like you are part of a movement that maybe God is doing in and outside the church right now?
It's 100% the latter. That there is something going on, and that
Mhm.
has been the most encouraging thing as I've getting ready to release this book and people are starting to react to it, is to see how many people connect with this story and
Mhm.
how many people are going, me too, I had this and I had that and all of this. And I remember it being in my 20s and trying to work through some theology that is in this book, but early, decades ago, trying to work through it and asking like my favorite Bible prof, like, hey, what's a good resource? And like he recommended an Old Testament survey textbook. It was like 600. And I'm like, this is not at all what I'm asking about. He didn't know. Like he didn't know a great resource to give me. I have written this primarily, like where I started was for like the younger version of me, of like what would I
Uh,
have really wanted to know as I navigated my own journey. And it's taken me all these years, because here's what I have found. If so track this logic. If you only know about Jesus or experience Jesus through like a particular community or tribe, so it can be a local church or even bigger, like a denomination. If that's the only expression of Jesus you know, if things go wrong or sideways with you in that church or you in that tribe, you then like your whole foundation for Jesus falls apart too, because
Mhm.
that's how you were introduced to Jesus. That's how you know Jesus, right? So you're like, oh gosh, if that went bad with them, I guess I'm like also not good with Jesus anymore. And so what you have to do is you have to have a more robust Jesus than what any one tribe or any one group would say this is who Jesus is. And I had spent years developing that. So the question I got asked all the time right after I resigned is, are you and Jesus okay? And it was funny because it's like, Jesus didn't do this to me. Like
Yeah.
the church did this to me. And the church and I are going to have to work through some things that took us years to work through. Jesus and I were good because I had a more robust view of Jesus than what my tribe had introduced me to. And that's what I'm hoping the book is going to give people language for. So if things have gotten weird with your community or your tribe or the people who introduced Jesus to you, I'm offering you a more robust language and depth of this to go, oh, I can still be totally good with Jesus, even if I don't experience Jesus the way that they do. And that's been really cool as well to see people kind of go, oh, this is way bigger than I even thought.
right.
Yeah.
That is I will steal this line too. Like you need a more robust view of Jesus than the religious view of or the religious expression of Jesus that you grew
Yeah.
up in. Because you're right, that's the difference. Is so many people actually have a very small view of Jesus and a robust view of their church. And as soon as their
Yes.
church doesn't
Yes.
work for them anymore, they didn't actually really have Jesus.
Yeah.
Right. And then that's why they walk away from it, because they're like, well, then
Yeah.
Jesus must not be good or must not
Yeah.
have anything
Yeah.
to offer me. And that's where I'm like, no, 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 no. And that's
Yeah.
why I think all the people who kept asking me, are you and Jesus okay? In their
Yeah.
mind, they're assuming if I was in your place, my
Yeah.
view of Jesus would fall apart.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that question indicates the framework they live in.
Yeah.
And for me, I just wasn't living in that framework. So I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
Jesus and I are good. But it's because I had views of Jesus that my tribe didn't resonate with. And so when things got weird with my tribe, I was like, oh, Jesus and I are good, because
Yeah.
that's beyond that.
Yeah.
And that's what I would want that for every single person. Even if you're like, hey, I love my local church and everything's great. Awesome. You still want a more robust view of Jesus
Yeah.
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 just for your own, spiritual
I
journey.
had this last Sunday, my wife was asked to speak. So I guess this is across the board. I'm not sure, but the Methodist Church had it's called Women in the Pulpit Sunday, where they basically try to promote, I don't know, just shine a light on women on this one particular Sunday. Well, and so there was a predominantly African American Methodist church in my hometown that one of my wife's very best friends goes there. And then they said, "Hey, would you come and speak?" Right, which is kind of funny. I'm a Baptist pastor, and they're asking my wife to come speak at a church. And so some of the people are like, "Oh, does that make you uncomfortable?" And but I remember taking my 10-year-old to the service, and the service there is significantly different
Yeah.
than where we go to church. And that's basically the church service that my 10-year-old has seen, right? It's comfortable to us, it's fine. And I remember having that thought is I want him to understand Christ bigger than what our service portrays.
Yeah.
Not because I have a problem with how our service portrays it, but I want him to know people know and experience and worship Jesus in many different ways. And I'm like really glad. And like we're like a third of the way through the service, and he's like, "Can we come here every week?" But he's also the kind like if today's going well, it's the best day of his life.
Yeah.
But 20 minutes from now, if it goes bad, it's the worst day of his life. But I was like so excited to be like, "You're enjoying this. You're enjoying this culturally different Jesus, this musically different Jesus." Because you're right. I'm like, I want you to have a more robust, now that you're saying it, it's like, I want you to see Jesus as bigger than our Sunday morning service.
Totally.
Yeah.
And you can do that without having any indictment on your current experience.
Yes.
And that's the beauty. It's like, why would you not want that?
Well, and
But
so
if you do it, then it sets you up where if it ever does
Yeah.
go weird, you're gonna be way more okay.
I do think it offers this weird contradiction that most pastors probably aren't intending. And that is, if they do their job well, people will see Jesus as bigger than that moment. But when they do, they'll be uncomfortable with it.
Yeah. Well, it
Okay,
reminds me of we did the podcast with Aaron Simmons, and he talks about Kierkegaard, and the Kierkegaard philosophy is faith without risk isn't faith. And it becomes this, it reminds me a lot of what you're saying. Like it becomes this element of how do we have faith and security at the same time? Like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And that's where, you talk about living on the edge, where the edge provides risk enough to say, hey, like open the door to other aspects of and experiences of Christ than what you're comfortable with, because it actually is faith that is living out faith in the sense that we're supposed to.
And I think this is my hot take here. I suspect a lot of pastors think you don't need to do what I'm saying because the version of Jesus they're preaching is so complete. That's all you need.
Mm.
And
That's a
a
good
really
point.
dangerous place, I think, to
Right.
operate.
Because
So
we're
not all
right,
pastors.
you're
Yeah,
wrong.
but it's like, hey, the version you're going to get in our church is all you need. And I would just say, like,
Yeah.
no, like, don't be content with that. And my journey was like, I was raised as a pastor's kid, and I didn't know a lot of the theology. Like, I didn't know the theology in this book that I just wrote till I was in like my 20s and 30s. Like, I didn't know the ideas existed. That to me is a flaw, not oh, that's totally healthy. Like,
Mhm.
so like when my kids ask me a theological question, like, Dad, what's the Bible say about hell? Rather than saying, here's my view, it's the only view, this is the right view, I'll say, well, historically, the church has had three different views of this, and there are verses that would seem to imply all three of these views, and let me explain all three of them to you. And then I'll tell you which one makes the most sense to me. But I want you to be aware there are three views. I didn't know there were three views.
Yeah.
I was in my late 20s before I even read about annihilationism, and I'm like, what? There have been Christians that have not, adhered to eternal conscious torment. Like, I didn't even know that was a thing. And to me, I'm like, that's not a more robust Jesus. That's a smaller Jesus. Like, let's
Yeah.
let all of the nuances be, and then, like we talked about, be okay to say, hey, this is the one that resonates the most with me and makes the most sense. Sweet.
So how do you think the church got busted? Like because
How-
because like the reality
No
is
pressure. No pressure, but
let's assume the best, right? Like the apostles come, the apostles leave,
Yeah.
and the church is good, godly people's best attempt to honor the truth that's been entrusted to us and the experience of knowing and living God in community. And that evolved through the Catholic Church. And then there's the Protestant Reformation, and there's these refining moments, but then there's also these breaking moments. But you would sit here and say that, yeah, for a lot of people, probably most people, the church still works for them. It checks the boxes. But for a lot of people who are kind of coming out of coming out of the woodworks, it's like, dude, you're putting voice to my experience, right? And I can say, like, for me, it was what you're saying. A lot of what you say and what Josh and I talk about rings true in my life, but I've never. It's one of those, you hear something. It's kind of the Richard Rohr thing. And the moment you hear it, you're like, no greater truth has ever been true to me.
Yes, yes.
But I didn't know it until you said it. And so up to this point, I've just tried to force myself to make the best of what I had because, like you, I didn't love a lot of it, a lot of my experiences in church and a lot of those kind of conforming moments, but I 100% wasn't willing to walk out on Jesus.
Right,
Like that was the greater sin to me.
right.
And so I've just tried to make it work. I play the role, I toe the line, right? And just hoping one day it feels 100% authentic. And then realizing, well, maybe I'm one of these, others that are like, I love Jesus and I think the church is a beautiful thing, but it's kind of busted in some ways.
Yeah.
How did we get there?
So it's a brilliant question,
Mm.
and I'll try to succinctly answer it.
I mean, you wrote the book, so
Well, I
Yeah.
think I would trace it to Constantine.
Mm-hmm.
When Constantine gets the power and connects the power and the church together, right? So the first few hundred years of the church, the theology was very different than what became after Constantine, because a church that doesn't have power is going to live out that expression very different than the church that's at the table making all the decisions, right? And so you start having new theologies emerge, right, after Constantine, after the empire is Christian and this is the official religion, right? Well, then you start needing to figure out how do you use this religion to get people to do what you want them to do, which is very different than what it was the first few hundred years. And so that's where you
because
start
that becomes
seeing
a politicized religion.
absolutely. And here's what's hard part, and I want to give a nod to the Christians in this era because I think we dunk on them a lot. But here's what I think: if you were living in that moment, you would absolutely think this is the greatest thing
Yeah.
that could have ever happened to Christianity. The emperor just became a Christian. Like, for sure, I think I would be the guy that's like, praise Jesus. Like, this is
Yeah.
the coolest thing ever. Now, we in hindsight can see what did that create? And I would say created the model we know today as Christendom, which
Yeah.
is not the best expression of the church.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's book after book that has historically taken that apart. And so the question is like, well, what's wrong with the church? When the church relies on power and influence and dominance, and we are going to assert ourselves in order to bring the kingdom, that's what's broken in the church. And it's never what the church was meant to be. And so you still have people even today in those models who don't, that's not their heart. But the problem is they're existing within that model, and that's what they're
Yep.
actually creating. And so a lot of us came from that model. I definitely came from that model and that way of thinking, and began to realize there's some cracks in the foundation. There's some cracks in the walls, and tried to pursue those and realize, oh, this isn't what I thought it was. And so now I'm going, hey, I think I can experience a much healthier version of Christianity on the edge that doesn't have the power, doesn't have the influence. And so, like, for me, one of the craziest things, I go from being the mega church pastor and, again, speaking to thousands of people every time. And now I speak primarily at a one service Mennonite church that is been amazing. And it's just a small group of people, and literally is like the most beautiful expression. Like, I just love it. And so if you would have told me that 6 years ago, I would have been like, what? Like, I wouldn't even have a box to put that in. But that's because I was still convinced that the other model was the end all. And so I think the other model has strengths, and I get into this in part 3 of the book. There are strengths to the institutional model. There are also weaknesses. And my thing is, can we talk about the weaknesses in addition to the strengths? Because all we normally do is like, yeah, but here's what the megachurch can do. And da, 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 da. I know all those. I was the advocate, for why that's the healthiest model. But now I'm the voice that's like, let me tell you also what the weaknesses of that model are. And that's what gets me alienated from other, evangelicals are like, you're making us look bad. It's like, no, I'm just trying to show holistically there are pros and there are cons to this. And there are pros and cons to any other expression as well. We just tend to only show the negatives of anything else. And so I think it's about leveling the playing field to say, hey, in the institutional model that we've all inherited, there are pros and there are cons. And in these other emerging models that are coming that, can look all different ways, there are pros and cons as well. And what if we, just a crazy idea, put all the pros together and we're aware of the cons and tried to create the healthiest expression together that we could? And that's really where the book takes people by the time you get to the end.
Do you feel like when that, because I mean, it's a great idea. Like, I mean, because when if you were to present that to somebody, everybody's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But then when you try to work it out, what do you feel like is the biggest roadblock for that? Like, do you feel like it's because, when I'm thinking about having these conversations, I feel like who wouldn't agree to that? Like this just makes sense to take all the pros of everything that we've known and work off of each other's, generation of generation. Like it's building towards something better. At least it should. You learn from the past and you keep working towards the present and the future. And so like what is the biggest roadblock? Is it they have to give up power? Is it they have to, figure out like what do you feel like is the biggest halt?
Humility. I think it requires humility that most, I'm trying to think if I want to say most. I think it's most. Most of these church models don't have. And so there is this belief, and they would couch it in spiritual language, right? Of, hey, we just are so passionate about saving the lost. Like we can't waver from our mission. And like that would be the language that would be used, not, we're proud about how we do it. But ultimately, to say that there are inherent flaws in the model, I think is where you would lose someone. And that's where I I come from this environment. So like I have so many pastor friends and many of them are still pastors. And so I get in conversations with them in real time. It's like I'm not an outsider and yet there's been tension with a lot of them, right? Where it's like, "Hey dude, you're making it look bad the way you talk about this." And that's why not everybody. And so to that person, to that pastor, they would not love my book. They would not love these ideas. They would not say, "Yeah, let's figure out what the deconstruction community is doing really well right now and learn from them." They
Mm.
wouldn't say that. And they don't say that. And I've been in those environments where I've tried to pitch some of these ideas and have gotten the backlash of that, of how dare you say that we don't have this figured out. We've dialed this thing in. And literally I've been told we've been doing this for hundreds of years. Like we've dialed this thing in, and it's an arrogance of this is the right way to do it. And to me, I just want nothing to do with that anymore. And I contributed to that for many years, didn't fully realize that I was. Once I became more clear in that of like, oh, I am a part of this. I am building this. It was like, I don't want to do this anymore. So that's not the enemy. And I try to say that really clear in the book. The enemy is not that, but that can become the roadblock to all of us moving forward when you get into these environments. We're like, no, this is the way it should be done. It's
Yeah.
Do you
really, really
think
tough to grow.
do
Yeah.
you think you had would have reconstructed had you not went through the crisis of faith personally by being having to resign and leaving the megachurch? Do you think you still would have gotten to the edge?
So that's $1 million question, Marty, that my
Mhm.
wife and I, we toy with this question all the time. And here's the most honest answer. I think this is true. I think I would have got there. It would have taken me a while.
Mhm.
Yeah. Because I don't know if you find yourself in the situation, but most of the things that you say are probably thoughts that you had before,
Mhm.
Yes.
but you made them in like subscript font
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because you're like, these would really undermine the
Mhm.
headings of what's
Well, you know where I
defining my
realized
life.
that? When I stepped away from my role and I didn't run back into being a lead pastor somewhere else. And I suddenly changed my mind on a number of theological positions I had. And it confused me because I was like, why am I suddenly changing my mind? And what I realized was I already had the seeds of these ideas, but because of my connection to the community, I didn't want to get too far out in front of where my community was.
Yeah.
And so I knew where they were, and I don't think I fully allowed myself to entertain some of these ideas because of my relational connection with the community of like, I don't want to get too far in front of what this would mean if I were to embrace this idea. Well, once I didn't have that, and it's like, it's just me,
Mhm.
I'm not speaking on behalf of any community, then it was like, oh, yeah, for sure, that makes the most sense to me. And it was a little bit like, oh, these suckers were there before, but I love the subscript font. Like I just the type was too small. I didn't realize
Yeah.
that they were there.
Yeah. Which brings up a good point because that and even when you say that, it reminds me of, at least the journey we've walked through. Where if you provide somebody, and this may lead into the third part here, if you provide somebody an opportunity to connect with another community where these little questions and seeds and fonts are kind of like welcome, I think people would gladly switch over. But
Mm,
it's this thought that I lose because it goes into survival, it goes into psychology, it goes into human nature. I lose my tribe, I lose my community, I lose my life, I lose my livelihood. My identity that has always been this is about to change because I think this is right or this is wrong. That's terrifying. And so a lot of people will either not talk about it, not question it, or openly ignore it, even if it makes sense. Like even we've had conversations with people. It's like that what you're saying contradicts itself so much that it doesn't make sense why you believe it. But at the heart of it, it's not about truth. It's about their values in their community or being connected or being in that type of church. I mean, I guess it all ties back to church and their identity and things like that. But I don't know. I think your book provides an open door. Marty said this before, an open door where people who are scared can take it, read it, and feel encouraged to actually do it.
and if that happened, that would be like the greatest thing for me
Yeah.
as the author to go, this gave you a sense of belonging, a
Mm-hmm.
sense of you're not
Yeah.
alone. That's the number one thing I hear from people is I thought I was the only one who felt this. I thought I was the only one who had this question. I thought I was the only one who had this doubt, right? Because when you're in that environment, it seems like it works for everybody else. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're the one sitting there, and again, I've been this guy where like you're sitting there and something is said from the stage and you're like, what?
Yeah.
What? And you look around and everyone's nodding, and you're like,
Yeah.
that's the craziest. Like, does no one realize what that would mean if that, it's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and then it's like, it's kind of like a collective gaslighting where everyone else seems to, this makes sense. So then you walk away and you
Yeah.
go, I'm crazy.
I'm the
Something's wrong
crazy
with me.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something's
So
wrong with
let
me.
me can I challenge you to respond to something for me? So one of my criticisms of the church, in the Bible, it talks about, the body of Christ is made up of many members, all of which it's not, one is not better than the other. They're all complementary to the purpose of what Christ is doing and the church as a whole. And I think that's true on small levels, but also on larger levels. And I've said this before, but like one of my criticisms of the church is I'm like, I feel like that's where denominations got it wrong. Is arms like arms, head like head, heads and arms, And so what happened is all the heads created this denomination, all the feet created this denomination
Mm,
because they like hanging out with each other. And because that's their area of strength, that part of scripture stands out as superior
right.
because it more connects with their soul. And so then what happens is I'm like, man, if I really think the church is supposed to be all these denominations together representing what value they add to Christianity, not the parts that we question about their Christianity, and we'd have a more comprehensive body. How is this what you're discussing? Not just you figuring out a body part nobody else has acknowledged and just adding to the denominational list or
Mm,
adding to, so like for example at a high school you walk in there and there's all these different subgroups, and it's like you got your athletes and your emo and you've got your cheerleaders or whatever it may be, and then all of a sudden one day somebody has the guts to say, man, I really like anime. And then all of a sudden somebody else is like, dude, I like anime too, like I'm a big, you name it, Dragon Ball Z fan. And all of a sudden this group has formed because somebody had the guts to say something that was true for a lot of people that nobody was talking about, but all they effectively did was just add to the group.
right.
how is this not just another group that's like, yeah, they didn't fit with the other groups because they're just wired a little different, but now there's somebody that's acknowledging that, so now they just are just being added to the list. Like, how is this God is moving in a good way and not just we're just figuring out another subgroup exists.
Yeah, brilliant question. So I would say, like, I don't look at anyone in the center and say, you're not Christianity. You're not a
Mhm.
Christian. You're not real, right? So this is not any sense of, hey, the edge is the superior people. We are the right ones. Like, no, I would make room for all of the, in the illustration, it's like a circle, right? Anyone who
Mm-hmm.
wants to be in the circle, like the circle, you're welcome. And I don't think Jesus is going to make you follow him, but if you are interested, like circles, welcome to anybody who wants to be a part of this. So in that regard, it is no different. It's just we're a part of the same thing together. We just exist at a different place in the circle than some other people do. Where it is different is I would say, think about it this way: did Jesus ever pick sides? I would say yeah. Now we can get uncomfortable with that. I'd be like, no, Jesus loved everybody. I would say if it was ever between the majority and the minority, Jesus is going to pick sides, and he's always going to pick the
Yeah.
minority.
Yeah.
And whenever there was a system and someone being oppressed by the system, Jesus would
Hmm.
always pick that person.
Hmm.
This last weekend, I preached on the mimetic view of atonement and the idea of scapegoating, and Rene Girard. And I made the statement Jesus always is with the scapegoats. Like, so if you ever want to know, like, hey, who does Jesus stand with? Who does Jesus pick? It's always the scapegoats. So, in that regard, I would say, okay, so if we have a church model that is aligned with the majority and the system in power, and then you have another church model that is aligned with the scapegoats and those who are being victimized by that. Do we think that they are equally expressing the presence of the lived Jesus in our midst? Now that might make an uncomfortable answer, but I would say no. One of them is going to embody more of Jesus than the
Hmm.
other. Not to say the other aren't Christian or going to hell or anything like that. No damning statements. Just to say the Jesus I find did choose sides. And so to me, I think that should always be our heart is to go where Jesus is. Not here's where we are and we bring Jesus with us and we have more of Jesus than you do, but to figure out where is Jesus. And Richard Rohr's argument is Jesus is more found on the edges, right? That's where he actually is. He's not in the center of this thing. That's where the systems are. And that's where you have to maintain things and protect things and build things. That's not what Jesus is doing. Jesus is in the midst of the oppressed and the marginalized and the scapegoated, who are all on the edges as well. And so
Yeah.
to me, that's where I would say, in one sense, we're all in the same circle. In another sense, we're doing our best to go where Jesus is and to say, yeah, I don't think Jesus is in the dominant system that I have been a part of for a lot of my life. I don't think that's the best expression of him. I'm experiencing him far more in these versions today. And so it's trying to normalize that these versions have validity because, due to the nature of the center wants to discredit any other expression as not legitimate or not real. And so, even in the book, I list a number of what would be considered fringe or edge expressions of Christianity that people may not be aware of that I would want to shine a light on and say, these are beautiful expressions that we should be aware of and learn from and grow from and be locked in arms together.
Yeah. And that even makes sense even from the stories of Jesus and the locations of like where he did ministry. He did ministry around the edges of Jerusalem. Like he
Yeah,
was
literally.
in that. And then I mean
And
Jerusalem.
when he showed up at the institution, he was pissed.
Yeah, when he showed up in
And
the
things
middle,
didn't go well.
That's
right.
right.
When he went to the center, he was not accepted as well as he thought.
So I,
But
all I can think about, I meant to make this really bad joke earlier, but you talk about how the edges are always better than the center, and all I could think about is unless you're eating a cinnamon roll, because with a
Ooh,
cinnamon
that's
roll,
fair, Marty. That is
you
fair. I will
can't.
take that criticism.
So
Yes.
every
no,
time,
don't
like the
don't tell him
center's
stop.
bad,
Don't.
The center, the edge is where it's at, and I'm like, man,
That's amazing.
except for a cinnamon roll, dude. It's
I'm gonna.
nobody.
Okay, now I'm stealing that because that's hysterical.
Because I'm like, Richard Rohr's probably he was probably sitting there one day and he's like, I got this a little bit wrong. Because you just eat the outside to get to the core.
Man.
And some might even skip some of the outside just to get to
100%.
the
Yeah.
core.
If I only have one bite, who
I'll
am
tell
I
you what,
giving
I
that bite
remember, and I
to?
can't remember who this was. I remember someone in my life wouldn't eat the center of their cinnamon rolls. Like they would leave it and like not eat it.
They're
And I
not a
literally
Christian.
looked at that person like you must be a serial killer. Like
That's right.
something is so broken in you because everybody knows the center is the
Yeah.
best part of a cinnamon roll.
Yeah.
Man, way to contradict your entire book right there.
You know
That
what?
one statement.
That's right.
You know what? This
Man.
doesn't even make sense anymore. I don't think I should publish this.
I mean, at this point,
Is there
you
still
know
time
what?
to
We'll
pull
just
it?
edit this whole thing out, and the new title is going to be Jeremy rescinds his title.
Recants
New title.
the edge. He
The
no longer
center
he's
is
he's now
everything.
moving toward the center.
Yeah. Stay away from the edges. The center is everything. Part 2.
I'm sorry. That's all
Dang,
I've been
Marty,
able
why
to.
you gotta do that?
That's all I-
Yeah.
Why you gotta
Way to
destroy it?
absolutely
So
destroy this whole entire conversation.
yeah, that's brutal.
I
Um,
apologize.
Well
no,
done,
but
sir.
it does like after trying to redeem this a little bit, but it does make perfect sense in the sense because even when you first you told us the title, I'm like, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean? And once you start laying out, there's so many layers to that in so many different ways. It makes perfect sense, and I think that will be extremely helpful for people that listen. Of like, oh, okay, the edge of the inside is catchy, but there sometimes there's titles that are catchy. And we actually just had this conversation last week where I kind of bashed Christian books for a minute. This isn't one of them, so you're safe. But
That's because his
it's
book's not Christian.
right, yeah. True. So you're safe. You're safe. This is I think
There are
I think
some
they
who would
said,
agree with you, Marty. Yes. That's
this new
amazing.
self-help book, The Edge of the Inside. But it's like all of them are the same. Like all of it ends up being like some similar version of this, and this. But the layers of this title really have, I mean, and this is what I'm taking away from our conversation outside of your cinnamon roll comment over here. It really was a perfect title. Like, I mean, in all honesty, like I really truly is like, man, this is a great. The more we talk, the more I'm like, this title is
Man,
nailed.
he really thought this through.
Man,
Well, here's what's interesting to that point that you just made. I tried I think like 4 times to write this book, and each over the years, and each time it didn't feel right. It felt bitter, or the angle wasn't right. I was just like, it's not clicking.
Yeah.
And so again, like a lot of start and stops and like failed attempts, and just like put them in the notes, and maybe I'll do some later. I came across that phrase. Someone, sent it to me after a thing, and then I put that phrase on my website, on my homepage of, finding Jesus on the edge of the inside or something. And I just loved the phrase. It was like, this is my life and all this. Hadn't connected it to the book yet. And I'm in a conversation with a friend of mine who's an author, and he was asking me about, hey, what you gonna write again? And I was kind of like, whatever. And I used I connected for the first time in that conversation, not realizing it, connected the edge of the inside to my journey into this, like what I would want to write about. And it was like
All the pieces fell in together. Yeah.
in a bizarre way, where like the next 2 weeks, all I did was write. I mean, like every free moment, because it was like everything clicked. I describe it as the water turned to wine, and it was like bam. And I cranked out the majority of the book literally in those 2 weeks, because something just resonated with that phrase and then these ideas, and it was like I could see all of it. I could see like this is part 1, this is part 2, this is part 3.
That like whenever I'm like having to preach and I'm like writing a sermon on a very small level, I feel like that's kind of the thing. It's like I'm studying this material, but it's not clicking. And then you land on the thread of the day. You land on that thread, and you're like, the moment I land on the thread, I know the entire message. I just have to put it together.
Yeah.
And it's like
it literally was, I felt like I couldn't write physically fast enough to get it out of my head. Like once it clicked, that's how I felt. Like I would sit down and just the words would just flow out of me, which for a writer is like the best thing you ever want to feel. And I wish I felt it all the time, and I don't. But after that phrase clicked, and so again, I love you saying that, Josh, because I hope that phrase, again, I didn't coin the phrase, it's Richard Rohr, but I
Mm,
hope the concept of this
mm-hmm,
is life-giving for people. I hope it
mm-hmm,
gives them words to say, "Oh my gosh, me too. Like this is my
mm-hmm,
journey and my story." And I want that same like jolt of energy
mm-hmm.
for everyone else to feel, whatever that means for them. And if the book does that, like be the greatest thing that I could hope for.
So
Yeah.
you may not want to answer
Yeah.
this, but I'm going to ask it. Were there any other titles that you contemplated that you could say?
Yeah, I mean, I can't even remember any of the other ones because they like never resonated with me.
Yeah.
So I had
Okay.
like all sorts of working titles. I'm always working on stuff, so like I've got notes and stuff, and I had things, but nothing that ever got to
Nothing
like
stuck out.
I
Yeah.
think this is the
Significant.
title of the book.
Nothing annoys
And
me
that was the
more.
problem. I couldn't find an angle for it. I couldn't.
You know how sometimes musicians will write a song and they give them like it's like this is the name of the song, but everybody else calls it this, so they put like a double name.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That drives me nuts. I don't know why, but I'm like, just pick whatever you want the name to be. Just pick the name. Like so, I don't know what that's worth, but that's what you made me think of.
I
That's
had
So
originally played with like ideas around failure of
yeah,
yeah.
like, because I was like, maybe that's the angle of like how to redeem
yeah,
failure,
like
like
finding your
that.
faith in the midst of failure or
Yeah,
something.
like that kind of was like what I
Yeah,
kept trying, and it like nothing was just really resonating. Because I'm like, this doesn't quite capture it.
yeah.
And then it was like once I had this, I'm like, there was never a second thought. Like that's the title of the book.
How how has this journey been? You talk about this. Maybe it's in the first chapter. I read it somewhere. It may be the first chapter of the book. Which also, speaking of the first chapter, the story of you leaving Oregon and getting and your kid throwing up and you getting to the hotel and there being dog crap everywhere. Like I was reading that and I could feel it so much. Like in my head, I sat down on the edge of the bed and just started crying.
Hmm.
Like in my head, I was like, this is I would collapse. Like that sounds exhausting. Anyway, it's funny in hindsight because
Only
if
in
something
hindsight.
bad could have went sideways for you guys, it did. But I could almost smell your experience as you described it. But I think it's in there. You talked about maybe your wife. So my question is, when you put words to your reconstruction experience, did that take her small font and give her permission to make it bigger? Or had she actually been there before you and was just like, Jeremy, I've been waiting on you, buddy. Like, welcome. Like, because I have this kind of my personal belief that, like, me and my wife, like, God's not going to tell me something he's not telling her.
Yeah.
So if I come in and I'm like, hey, here's this new thing, and she's like, I'm not on board with that, then either God's not done telling us or it's not God that's telling me
Mm.
because I think he's working through both of us. And so, what was that experience like for her to be kind of your wingman on this journey?
I love that question. So I would say she's not wired theologically like I am. So I need to make it make sense theologically. She doesn't. Like that's just not the way her brain works. She also didn't grow up Christian. So like a lot of the references in the book, she doesn't get the joke because like the audio adrenaline reference. Like
Yeah,
she never grew up with audio adrenaline. So she came to faith as a high schooler and had a very different, journey than me. I would say we absolutely were either in step or she was probably slightly ahead of me, but not theologically,
Yeah.
just
yeah,
holistically embracing something
Yeah.
new, I think. And so she's even been, the one now where she'll like we do a TikTok series called Jer, I Have a Question, and she asks me like random questions that she has and then puts me on the spot and I try to answer them. Well, the reason the series works, at least part of the reason, is because her questions are the things people are thinking about, but they don't say them out loud. And literally,
hmm
she has people tell her this, like, "Hey, um, we don't discuss the things that you guys do in this video because like I didn't think it was okay to say them out loud, but like you
Mm-hmm.
were asking him questions." I'll give you an example that
yeah.
may make some of your listeners uncomfortable. So just here's your edit point if you want to cut out this illustration right here. She asked me a question the other day, and I was like, oof. She's like, hey, do you think that as we look at everything with the Epstein files and what we're learning about our culture and leaders and all of this that, is emerging from that, do you see connections to that and like the Bible and especially the God of the Old Testament?
Mm.
And I was like, oof.
And you were not prepared for that question at all.
No. So like imagine like
So
yeah,
you're just,
yeah. So it's like here's a camera, react to that.
yeah,
So you don't know the question before she says it.
No.
man.
And that was one of the ones she dropped on me. Here's the point. You might look at that and go, how dare you ask that question? Da, da, da. The point is, what we've learned is there are people asking that question.
Yeah.
Yes. And
And
you, I
where
think it's a, I saw that one because you reference is that the one where you reference a chapter in the beginning of the Old Testament somewhere, Numbers or somewhere, and you're like, this
yeah,
is my
Numbers
least favorite
31.
chapter in the whole
Yep.
Bible.
Yep. Yeah.
I,
And I talk about if you take a literal surface reading of some of the Old Testament, yes, God looks like God could be in the Epstein files because, and you're absolutely right, Marty. Great memory, by the way. I referenced Numbers 31, where the Israelites conquer and they get virgins as the spoils of war. And then they divide up, I think it's 32,000 virgins that they divide up amongst them. And there's this whole system in Numbers 31 of who gets what. And God gets an allotment of virgins for God. And the whole thing to me is just the creepiest. Like, all right, you guys get this many virgins. You get this many. We got to give some virgins to God. And it's like, that was written by a dude. Like, you cannot tell me that was not written by a dude.
Yeah.
You know, like
or a
with
perverted Oprah. You get a virgin. You get a virgin.
perverted Oprah.
I think I found our edit point. I found our edit point. We're fine. I found
Oh,
our
it's
edit point.
incredible. Wow, Marty, you're dropping some fire today.
Hey,
Cinnamon
that's gonna be
rolls,
the that's
perverted
gonna be the
Oprah.
show title.
his
Right
next
there.
session is gonna be terrible.
I
Like
can't
all
wait
of
to
this.
see your next session. Like that guy is gonna have his life changed.
Man.
So yeah, but here's the thing. Regardless of where you land on it, is it okay to talk about these things? And
Yeah.
who is talking about them? And where do we talk about them? And I would say she pushes me in that where, like that when I was like, oh gosh,
Yeah.
Mm,
okay, I hadn't been thinking about that, but let's
Yeah.
go there, right? And so I think she has been there. And then, where the series works is like she doesn't have the theology to like make sense of it. So that's where she's like, hey, theologically, how do we
Yeah.
reconcile this and this? And then that's where her and I get in really great conversations where we kind of work it out together. So I think we're in the same journey. It's applied differently because we're just wired differently and we think differently.
mm,
Yeah.
But
I,
it's been both of us certainly
yeah.
together.
yeah.
That's
I
awesome.
have to give my wife credit
Mm,
because she was asking me hard questions before I was willing to ask myself hard questions
Yeah.
mm,
through her own journey. Right. Like she had this whole shtick for a while where she'd say God is a narcissist, based on the God that
mm,
we were taught to have. It's like this, like send people to hell, send people to this, like all of this, like worship me. And she's like, I don't get this.
yeah.
And it was like, I was like, that's inappropriate. You shouldn't say that.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, dude, that was a really deep, challenging thought.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but what I was getting back to is I think for people that grew up in church, that church gave them something, right? And I think you, just like me, just like Josh, kind of grew up in some semblance of that. And and it's hard when you're like, get to this point that you're like, this church still does offer me something. But when my goal is to get Christ, it's no longer the offering me that the best.
Yeah.
And it's
Mm,
hard because to let go of that is there's a grief. You're
Yeah.
letting go of some stuff, right? Whether it
mm,
be friendships or just security. Comfort's the word that keeps coming to my mind. And you talk about that a lot. Comfort and security.
mhm,
And whereas your wife not growing up in that, and I think my wife too,
mhm,
growing up in a family that didn't like really tout that as heavily, to question it and to shift doesn't lose as much. It's not
Yeah.
as scary because you didn't build your life in a different model
mhm,
Right.
that was inflexible. And so it's not as scary. Whereas I grew up in that, I'm like, no, it's scary to leave that security. It's scary to leave that comfort. but is it, what do I want? Do I want comfort or do I want Christ likeness?
Mm.
And where do I think Christ is taking me? Right. And I don't want to see this as a chastisement, because there's a lot of wonderful, beautiful, God filled people that I know in these institutions, and I still am involved in one myself. And I would never want to question their authenticity or their genuineness. But my experience there's different. And so it is kind of hard, and you probably felt that too. It's like, man, she can get there a lot faster than me, but I'm having to let go of family heritage,
Mm-hmm.
Oh
my
yeah.
my future, my whole upbringing.
And and the longer you spend in the center, the harder it is to leave it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
The more you lose when you leave it, right?
yeah.
And so, I was born in the center, it's like that was my existence for, the first 4 decades of my life. And that was that is a lot to leave that. She came into the center later in life and had, spent less time there. And so
Yeah.
I do think she's able to see things even that are hard for me to see. Um, there'll be times where we talk about this all the time. I'm reminded of this a lot. We have 5 kids we're raising. We're trying to like make sure they understand the person you marry affects so much of your life, as I'm sure you guys see professionally all the
Yeah.
time. Like you choose the wrong person, you're in trouble. And I'm so grateful to have someone where we can just have real conversations without either one of us going, "What? How dare you ask that?" And so I mean, there's
Yeah.
there's been seasons where she's like, in the midst of this journey, like, "Hey, do you still think Jesus is real? Like, you still believe this?" Like, and she's not asking it to me as like, "Oh, you had a bad thing with the church. Like, did you?" Her question is very different. Like, "Hey, as you're wrestling with all this, that still is what makes logical sense to you?" And it's like, yeah, it still does, and here's why, and here's how and so when you can go there where it's like, I don't
Mhm.
say to her like, "Hey, did you read your Bible today?
Yeah.
You
She
got
can
to read
hold
your
that
Bible."
tension for you.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
you can experience this however you need to experience this, and I can experience however. And I think for people to leave the center, you got to just give grace of like,
Yeah.
I stopped going to church for a while. I
Yeah.
stopped reading my Bible for a while.
Yeah.
Like I needed space and I needed a
Yeah.
reset to go. And again, it
Yeah.
wasn't me walking away from Jesus. It was like, I got to reset this whole thing that I have built for
Yeah.
decades, got to redo it. And it's taken me years to do that. And now, like now when I read the Bible, it's very different than how I was reading it back then and the way it felt. But
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's a journey.
We've got
I was gonna say I got one last
about
one
10
last
minutes
question.
left. Go ask your
I,
question, because I got
I'm
a
gonna land
question
it.
too.
Yeah. Like, but well, my question, it might be the same. Somebody gets done reading your book. Somebody's at that point. Somebody's like, man, this makes so much sense. This connects with me. Listens to the conversation. Listens to you talk. They're at the edge. What do they do next?
Yeah, that was my question, is if people are resonating with what you're saying and they're like, yes, this is speaking truth into me that I didn't know I needed. It's like, yeah, what's next? Like, where do they, so if I give up this community, where do I now
Right.
find my community? Or
Yep.
where, like, how do you now find and grow faith in the edge?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great question. I would say my biggest encouragement is you got to find your people. You got to find new community where you can ask the questions, where you can work through this, where you can learn from other people. Depending on where they live, there are not the same things available to everybody. And so, two things I would say is try to find your people, and there's a lot of options. Um, Once you kind of like find one of us, you start finding like, oh, there's other people that they talk to and they're friends with, and you start realizing this thing is bigger. I started an online community for people where it's basically like how we're going to live this out in real time. And so like we do book studies together, and we do online conversations that we can just talk theology in a safe space where you're not going to get lit up by other people who are like, can't believe you're asking that question. We do
Mm.
monthly video calls where it's like, hey, here's some things, let's work through it together. And it's been so life-giving. And people all often ask me, hey, what do you get hope in these days? How are you finding hope? It's like, well, often I find hope just watching people in our community live out their faith. And I'm like, gosh, you're doing it well. Like, look at you. Like, you're showing up, you're doing it. And so the days that I'm running low on hope, I'm going to borrow some from you. And I think everybody needs those people. And so when you leave your center tribe, you've got to find someone else. Otherwise you drown. Like you gotta find your people. And so I'm happy to be a connecting point for people. There's resources in the book at the end that kind of point you in the right direction. But here's the cool thing. There are a growing number of people who are having these kind of conversations, who are making
Yeah.
space for this. So where before it was like, I don't know where I would ever find community there, it's more and more, and it's only growing. And that's the really encouraging thing. The other thing that I would say is, just be open to whatever new thing God would bring your way. So for me, that has meant be open to this Mennonite community that is totally different than what I would have ever guessed. But one of the things I've told them is that they're making me realize that the thing that hurt me can also be the thing that heals me, meaning the church is what did all the damage. I never thought it would be another church that could come in and heal that, but that's what is happening right now. It's a completely different model, a completely different, function, and it's been very healing to be a part of that community. And so for me, it's like, wow, I didn't expect that. Wasn't necessarily looking for that. Just kind of that's the way it played out. I have found that a lot of other people are finding that as well. Now, some people, like we have someone in our online community who I think's in Georgia, and they're like, I can't find anything by me that is anything like this. And so they're still a part of their community and just kind of navigating it, but they've got a support network online to kind of help balance that. And so I think just being open to there are people out there, there are support networks out there, there are resources out there. You've got to flood yourself with it. Otherwise, the weight of it is just way too much.
Awesome.
So, any final comments on your end that you want to hit? Where can people find the book? And also, is there anything about the book we haven't touched on that you're like, hey, while we're mentioning it, I do want to, hit on this point really quick. And so, what have we missed?
I don't think we've missed anything. I've loved this conversation. You guys have asked some really great questions. You've given me a cinnamon roll issue to resolve. The thing that I would say, um, one of the things that I have heard feedback from, and this will be, I'll be really curious to watch more people because again, right now it's been like a book launch team that has given me feedback, so it hasn't been mass read yet. Section two is very different than sections 1 and 3. So section
Mhm.
one's way more memoir. Section 3 is kind of like inspirational, story driven. How do we move forward? Section 2 is a theology. And so each
Mm,
chapter I take on a different Greek concept of God and challenge it. And like, hey, how do we rethink God? What has been really fascinating to me is a number of people have said to me so far, the ideas in section 2 I've never heard before in my life. And I don't know. I guess I didn't think of it in those terms. Like this will be someone's first
mhm.
exposure to some of these ideas, but that makes me really excited and slightly nervous
Yeah,
because really excited because I love a book that introduces an idea to me that I've never heard before. And like the
yeah,
first time I'm exposed to an idea, like those are the books
Mhm.
that are special to me. So I'm really excited if my book can be that for people where they're like, holy cow, I didn't know you could rethink God like this or rethink this, or I didn't know there was other views. Like that is awesome. It also makes me really nervous if people have a knee-jerk reaction to
yeah,
section 2 of like, this is not the way I was,
yeah.
raised. So I don't know. That's my only like section 2. I'm
Okay.
really curious. I hope it's life-giving for people.
Okay.
I would, we give it a couple months down the road and let the book take off. New York Times bestseller, #1 in Spartanburg. But like
Highly doubt
bringing
it.
you back on to really discuss some of those things would be awesome.
That'll be so
with
fun.
with the
Yeah.
with the with the because we've this I mean that's literally what we do. We take thoughts or ideas we've had and we just hash them out. And it would be great to have you on and give it another highlight in maybe a couple months once it's rolling, and we'll have to book you through an agent and do all that. But it'll
So
Hey,
be
I
where
it'll be
can
reached out to
people?
you guys. Let the record reflect.
Yeah.
okay.
I enjoyed my conversation with you guys last time. I was like, these guys are doing something in a pocket of the country I wouldn't expect it. So
Right.
I was like, wow, this is cool that you guys are
Yeah.
hosting those
Yeah.
conversations east
Yeah.
of the Mississippi.
Hey,
That's right.
tell your friend down in Georgia we're not too far
Hey,
away.
yeah, and that's why you're last in certain communities, but you're first in some over here. So
So what where can people get the book? Is it on Amazon? Where's it gonna be
Yep.
released to?
So edgeoftheinside.com is the
Okay.
official website for the book. So if
Mhm.
you that has the launching page if you want to
Okay.
get a signed copy, I'm doing that. If you want Audible, Kindle, print, all of the links and everything are all there in one place. So edgeoftheinside.com. My website is jeremyjernigan.com, which has all the stuff that I work on. So the podcast I do a weekly blog,
Mhm.
everything related to the book. And so if someone wants to dive in more or check out our community that we do, all of that is there. But yeah,
And you did the reading for the Audible version already?
I did not do the reading. So
Oh,
yeah, so evidently you have to have a big boy publisher that
really?
will
See,
do that.
I've often wondered that because I consume most of my books through Audible. And so, like for example, Matthew McConaughey's autobiography, Green Lights,
That's
is
great audio.
narrated by
Yeah,
him,
I've
and it
listened to
is
it.
the greatest listening experience of your life. But
Great
I
guy.
always thought it was if you're the poor guy trying to save money, you read your own.
No, it's the other way.
It's the other way around. Oh,
man,
So they basically like the way my publisher. So we can talk about the publishing industry, which is a whole thing. I pitched this because my last book I did a traditional publisher. So I pitched this that way, and publishers are like, "We don't want to touch this thing with a 10-foot pole." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, this is not going to be mainstream evangelical type
yeah.
yeah,
publishing." So I found a smaller publisher that like they publish voices that don't often get
Hmm.
airtime, right? And so like that's their whole angle, and they have been phenomenal. But the way they do it is they partner with people who then create the audiobook. So I got to
Gotcha.
pick my guy.
oh, okay,
Um,
Yeah.
that was really that's a
You
really
get like
weird
it's like
process.
paint samples, but it's voice
Yes, yeah,
samples.
it is. You get literally like a minute voice sample. You get dozens of auditions where you can listen to them, and they're reading the part of the book, and so it's like, can I picture listening to you? And
Yeah.
because the first part is memoir, I'm like, I think it's got to be a guy because I think it'd be very confusing.
Yeah.
yeah,
So much personal stories of like,
Yeah.
well,
yeah,
this woman talking about my wife, like I think the
yeah,
sound would be weird. So I'm like, on other books, I don't think I'd care, but on this one, it's a lot of memoir-ish. But then it's like, whose guy, what guy's voice do I like? And so I had a couple, and then I found one I really liked. But I'll tell you what's weird is listening to him read the sections about my wife Michelle
yeah,
from another dude's voice is a
yeah.
little like
It's a
no
little
one else
Little
who
crazy.
jarring.
listens to
Yeah,
it's gonna have a hard time with it. But
Yeah.
for me, I'm like,
yeah,
huh, you don't
man.
So
talk about her like that.
you're like,
Yeah,
I want a dude's voice that represents what I hope people think I look like.
Yeah, I
Like
don't know what the guy looks like,
it's
but his
yeah, but
voice
in my
sounds
head, when I
cool.
hear a voice, I picture somebody.
Okay, yeah.
So it's like, who do I pick? Like, if I was picking a voice, I'd be like, who would this guy picture? And do I want people to think I look like that?
Hmm.
Anyway,
mm.
I think I would end up looking
I don't think the people are gonna find. You're not gonna find
equity.
unless you get the Undertaker to do
Do you
your
The
know?
Undertaker would be amazing.
Audible
No, who I
because
would.
that would
Do you
be
remember the movie The
lineup.
Green Mile?
Yeah, yeah.
The dude, the big black guy, he passed away. I forget his
I say he's
name.
dead. Yeah.
That's who I want
I'm
people to
tired,
picture me
boss.
as.
Man, high
Anyway,
hopes, high
love
hopes.
that guy.
That
Um,
guy, that guy's voice would like be soothing
I
to listen
know.
to him read a book.
He
Like,
put you to
dang.
sleep.
yeah,
Anyway, we got to wrap up. I got to run. But dude, thanks so much for coming
yeah,
on.
appreciate it.
Hey
So
guys, this has been a blast. I'm
we'll do
so
another one
excited to be
in a
highly
few
touted
months.
I'm
Yeah.
telling
in
you,
South
When
Carolina.
you
when you look at your numbers and there's like slight spike in South Carolina,
that's TNJ right there.
you know,
Mhm.
that's just me and Marty
Yeah.
buying 1,000 books
Listen, straight from
and passing them out on the
straight
street.
from the Cinnamon Roll Center over here.
Uh,
Straight from the core.
Yeah, I don't know
That's
what we're gonna do
amazing.
about the whole perverted Oprah thing. I guess we'll have to leave it, but see how
All
it goes.
right.
That would be
Well,
a clickable episode title.
that
Yeah.
would be. We'll see what happens. But all right, guys. Until next time, we hope y'all enjoy it. Take care.
Oh.